Chapter 62. Heroism saved the day. While these robbers focused on Akio Hinode, Hyunki and Juni got into their hideout quietly, and Hyunki hit the first robber on the lookout with his golf club. At the same time, Juni simultaneously threw a golf ball to the other one. Bullseye. Both robbers fell unconscious. Meanwhile, the police force with Huan Chul, other news reporters, and camera people arrived by the curve. They put off the lights from their vehicles and started to pad through the tall grass towards the abandoned mill. While inside the mill, Akio Hinode told the bank robber that with just one call, he could instruct his lawyer to talk to the bank and transfer the money they needed to his bank account. The leader became bitter and mad, shook his head almost to the brink of regretful dismay, as if to lose his wits, laughed with grumpiness because his supposed bank account didn't push through, and blamed Riel for it. The angrier the leader gets, he took Riel by the hand and slapped her, while Riel cursed and screamed, and Akio shouted, begging, "Stop! Please don't hurt her, I beg you. I will instruct my lawyer to bring the money here or maybe designate a pickup place for you to get it. Please, don't touch her," Akio was whining, imploring the remaining bank robbers. The leader got irritated by Akio's whimpering and aimed his gun at him. "You're stalling, huh? I guess there's no point in getting money from you, dude. I would rather kill you right now, and then kill your girl after I'm done with her." While the robbers were focused on Akio, Hyunki got inside the mill, successfully threw the golf club toward the head of the leader's assistant, and fell. The leader of the gang was stunned, then aimed the gun at Hyunki, when suddenly, Riel forcibly toppling her entire body over to the leader, causing them to fall down and lose hold of the firearm, destroying the wooden chair in the process, and freeing herself loose from restraint. Having seen the gun fall from the gang leader, Riel didn't waste time. She sprinted towards Akio and untied the rope around him. Akio removed the remaining ropes tied to Riel and the handkerchief that gagged her, then told her to run away. At the same time, Hyunki strikes a blow at the leader and keeps hitting him with his fists. Then the leader grabs a handful of dirt and throws it into Hyunki's eyes. Hyunki lost his balance and stumbled off the ground. The leader took the opportunity of retrieving the gun on the floor. As he aimed it toward Hyunki, Riel cried in vain, shouting, "No, no, no." Hyun Riel was alarmed that she swiftly ran toward Hyunki and shielded her body from the bullet fired, hitting Riel straight to her chest. And the blood splattered all over Hyunki's face, leaving Riel bloody and limp. Hyunki whimpered in anguish, calling out Rieler's name. "No, no, no, no." Riel Akio simultaneously screamed in intense grief, running towards Riel. The assisting crowd heard a shot outside the mill. They got shaken and alarmed that the police force immediately marched forcibly to the mill. The robbers were caught off guard and captured without a fight. One police officer came near Riel and immediately called the ambulance on standby. Upon seeing the lifeless body of Riel, Hyunki placed his arms around Riel, screaming and crying intensely in grief. The reporters documented the situation with their cameras and aired live news. Juni assisted the medics by pulling out Hyunki from his grasp of Rieler, so the physicians could carry her on the stretcher. The doctor took Rieler's pulse and shouted, "She is alive," then brought her immediately to the ambulance. Hyunki insisted on riding in the ambulance with Riel, and so was Akio. Back home, at Rieler's house, Mrs. Kalma and Rieler's sisters saw the live news broadcast. They were shaken and frightened, running confused and crying profusely, and could not accept that their Riel was held hostage and shot to death by the robbers. Mrs. Kalma was panicking when a doorbell rang, and Akio Hinode's right-hand man informed them that a helicopter awaited them. "My boss, Mr. Akio Hinode, the CEO of Hinode Group, would want to take you to your daughter, Miss Riel Kalma, who is in the hospital for surgery, ma'am." Mrs. Kalma was wondering who Mr. Akio Hinode was. Sensing Mrs. Kalma's questioning mind, the right-hand man said, "Mr. Hinode was your daughter's friend, and the robbers also took him as a hostage." While waiting for Rieler's surgery result, Hyunki and Akio conversed earnestly in a corner. "How did you meet Riel, Akio?" Hyunki asked. "She rented my mom's studio apartment, and my house was across the building, situated in a compound. She was walking by, and she caught my attention. She was beautiful in her bank uniform, and walked towards the gate. When I greeted her, I offered her a ride since I was on my way to work, so she accepted. Then we met again in a mall. Her friend, Natalie, disclosed that Riel would always invite her for meals before going home, because she had no fondness for cooking. We always accompanied her for dinner from then on, and our friendship began. Then it was Akio's turn to ask Hyunki, "Were you still in love with Riel? You must not be that angry at her for seeing us together. If you don't care for her anymore." Hyunki kept silent. Akio continued, "You had a girlfriend now, so don't tell me you're still interested in pursuing Riel. For what? To have your cake and eat them too? That would be unfair to both ladies. Why not set Riel free? She was already happy with her life and slowly moving on. That's not for you to meddle or decide," said Hyunki in a harsh tone. After 2 hours, the surgeon announced, "Who is Miss Kalma's guardian?" Both Hyunki and Akio stood, but Akio halted him. "Let me be the one. Besides, I'm waiting for Riller's mom to arrive, and they'll be here soon," Akio said. Akio rushed to the surgeon, then explained, "We took shrapnel from Riller's heart. It was good it didn't penetrate deep into her heart. She had a traumatic aortic injury, bruising a part of her aorta. Her breastbone usually heals in about 6 to 8 weeks, but it may take 2 to 3 months before she feels normal again. We are still waiting for her to wake up, for she was heavily sedated. After an hour, we will know how her body responds to the surgery." Then Akio said, "Give her the best treatment, doctor, and put her in a suite, so her family can stay and watch over her until she is well. Please provide her with around-the-clock care from nurses as well. I'll take the entire responsibility for her hospitalization." The surgeon smiled pleasantly, nodded, and returned to the operating room. Later, Mrs. Kalma and Riller's sister soon reached the hospital and ran directly to the operating room where police and newscasters were. Akio was haggard and grim, while he was with Hyunki and a reporter. They shared about the incident. The robbers were discovered and captured. While being interviewed, Mrs. Kalma called for Hyunki and asked for Mr. Hinode. Hyunki pointed to where Akio was still being interviewed. When Mrs. Kalma said, "Please introduce me to him because I want to thank him for helping us get here through a chartered flight," Hyunki was surprised. Then approached Akio and brought him to Mrs. Kalma. Akio bowed and extended his hand to Mrs. Kalma. "I'm Akio Hinode, ma'am. I am Reeler's friend and the son of the owner of Reeler's flat she was renting." Mrs. Kalma held his hands, showing her gratefulness. "Thank you, Mr. Hinode, for bringing us here through your chopper, or else we would still be waiting for seats to come here. And I also learned from the news that you offered yourself as a hostage instead of Riel, but they still took her. I am very grateful that you were there with her to make her courageous and strong, despite." Akio smiled as he nodded, appreciative of what Mrs. Kalma said. Donna approached Hyunki and said, "Thank you for saving the day, Hyunki, but it was heartbreaking that she gave her life to protect you from the bullet," patted Hyunki's shoulder. After 2 hours of waiting, it was 7 in the evening when the surgeon came out of the operating room and asked for the mother. Mrs. Kalma hurriedly came with apprehension. The surgeon said, Miss Kalma had not awakened yet, so we had to bring her to the ICU to monitor her heart rate. Mrs. Kalma was worried and tensed. "Oh no, not again. Why do these things always happen to her?" The doctor became curious. "Did this happen to her before this?" he asked. "Yes, doctor. 3 years ago, when she met a fatal accident, causing her to lose her memory. She had fully regained them just recently, so that's why she had stitches on her head," said the doctor. "Do you think this will happen again to my Riel?" Mrs. Kalma asked with great concern. "I could not affirm that. We must wait until she wakes up." The clock ticked for another 6 hours. Riel was still unconscious. Dr. Kalma and Riller's sister never left the viewing area of the ICU, watching her close, talking, and sometimes praying the rosary. Days and another 2 weeks have passed. She was stable and was transferred to a private suite. Hyunki never missed a day to visit her, sat by her bedside, and held her hand. Akio did the same, sitting by her bedside, holding her hand, staring at her for the longest time, sometimes touching her face, squeezing her hand, but remained silent. One night at the hospital, when all the patients were asleep and the nurse station was quiet, Riel suddenly regained consciousness, stretched her body, exited her bed, and crept out of the room quietly. She saw her mom lying on the couch in the visitor's lounge of her hospital suite, her hand under her head. She went toward her quietly, not to wake her up, and watched her mom asleep. Then she was walking toward the nurse station when she met this lady in white, halting her to a stop. "Who are you, and why are you blocking my way?" Riel asked. "Where do you think you are going?" Riel, the lady asked. "I would like to speak to a nurse and request a blanket for my mom." "Oh? Okay, go ahead." Riel proceeded to the nurse station, and the lady followed suit. A nurse was leaning on the countertop, writing notes on her pad. Riel greeted the nurse, but the nurse did not mind her. She again talked louder, but the nurse kept writing, not observing her. Riel snapped and was about to hit the countertop when her hand didn't fall on it. She tried again, but she felt nothing. The lady in white laughed and spoke. The nurse could not hear or feel your presence. Riel was startled and asked, "But why? What's the matter with her?" The lady in white smiled, then said, "Come, follow me. I'll show you something." What will the lady in white thought of showing Riel?